Good afternoon. Lynn and I thought that we would do this a little bit differently to try to do it more as a dialogue. But before I begin, I just wanted to, I just realized that some things have changed in my introduction. I've retired from Alberta Health Services, and way back in 2000, when we started the Chronic Pain Centre, it was myself and Dr. Pamela Barton who together helped put the team and the funding together that got that started. And I'm thank you, and I'm certainly very, very pleased that the Chronic Pain Centre is still going very, very strong here in Calgary. Now, the role of the physician and the pharmacist in the pain team is I believe, it's quite clear what roles they can play in helping people with chronic pain. But the role of the psychologist is a little bit less obvious. So what Lynn and I thought that we would try to do together is to answer a question that goes something like this. I'm not crazy. I have chronic pain. How can a psychologist possibly help me? So hopefully by the end of our discussion that the answer to that will be a little bit clearer. But Lynn, can I ask you, in your pain journey, you've seen psychologists. Can you give us a sense of what your reaction to being referred to a psychologist was?
Okay, Paul, and the verdict on that was that I'm not crazy. But, you know, I approached going to a psychologist with some trepidation because the word out there that was pain was all in my head. And I wondered what my doctor was thinking about that, Paul. I wondered if she thought that, well, maybe I just wasn't coping very well with life, and maybe the pain was psychosomatic. So I had some fears when I was referred to the psychologist, wondering what the psychologist was going to think, because they have all this training in the ins and outs of our psyche, and I also wondered maybe if they would catch some of my character flaws that I didn't want to have come out. Of course, I'm perfect now, but I don't know that I was then.
Thanks to the psychologist?
Thanks to the psychologist.
So what was your actual experience when you did go to the psychologist?
Well, it was a wonderful experience. I had the opportunity to be involved with a pilot project in Kitchener, Ontario, where two psychologists created this psychoeducational pain group. And, oh, we're going
to need the clicker.
And what I learned from them was that they're very kind and caring individuals, and they really wanted to help me and the other people in the group. And from them, I learned amazing things. I learned how to frame my pain, how to look at it differently than what I was, so it helped to stop the suffering that I was feeling. I dealt with emotions. I learned some really great coping strategies like deep breathing and visual imagery.
So that was part of the group experience?
Yes.
So what was it like being part of a group? Because I think that's another thing that people are often concerned about, is being in an environment where we're talking about personal things, and in fact there's, and it's not just yourself with the doctor, but in fact there's others there.
I wondered about how I was going to do. I was and am really quite a shy person, and I had fears about sharing my experiences because I didn't know any of these people, and I came to understand that they all felt the same way that I did, and actually part of the first session was dealing with that. That we all had different lives, but one of the common things was that we were trying to deal with our pain. So first of all, I learned that I wasn't alone. And then we were able to compare some of our stories. So I learned from other individuals who maybe were coping a little better than I was. I also learned that I was dealing with things maybe better than some of the other people, so I felt good about myself.
Mm-hmm. Right, thanks, Lynn. I'm going to advance the slide. So this is part of a survey that the Canadian Pain Coalition did, and that we highlighted this because it says 77% or 71% of individuals thought that they just had to live with their pain. So I think one can summarize part of the role of the psychologist is helping a person with pain sort of understand, well, what does living a healthy life with pain mean for me as an individual? So by healthy, we're talking about health in its broadest sense, so be that physical health, emotional health, health in relationships, health in one's spiritual life. So, well, how many here have had the notion I've got to just live with it? Is that okay? And then how many had the answer of what does living with it mean? That's the hard part, right? Is what does it mean? And there's many sources of valuable information to reflect on to answer that question for yourself as an individual. And one of the team members that really specializes in particularly the coping and the interpersonal side of that is the psychologist. But I think I want to add before we go to the next slide that as Dr. Toth was saying, that physicians get very little training in chronic pain and how to manage it. That certainly was the case when I was trained. I was trained before there was a recognized subspecialty in psychology of health psychology. So at that time, all of our training was really focused on mental health, and really nothing formal. This goes back more than 30 years ago, on the impacts of long-term chronic conditions on a person's emotional well-being and training on how to help people to cope. Now that's of course trained. Psychologists who are trained more recently have the option of learning those skills. So one of I guess the important points when you're seeking a psychologist sort of outside the pain center, where they all obviously have that as part of their background, is to really inquire about their awareness of chronic pain and their experience in working with people with chronic pain. Another, I think, important consideration is that the skill set of psychologists overlap with other professions. So, for example, social workers may have some training in this area, although often their skill sets are very strong in the interpersonal relationships and dealing with agencies. The behavioral health consultants that some of you may have worked with at the primary care networks also have strong backgrounds in teaching people coping skills. Occupational therapists have some background in this area as well as some nurses. So just want to acknowledge that there's quite a number of health professionals who may be helpful in this area. So let's move on to the next slide. So acknowledging and normalizing. So one of the things that has been alluded to already, which is really quite true for many people with chronic pain, is that it takes a long time to be diagnosed. At some point, you're not sure if the problem is really you, or maybe really you are kind of losing it. Chronic pain is stigmatized because, as Dr. Toth mentioned earlier, it's not like you can show the scar typically. So people often doubt themselves. They often don't communicate with others and often feel quite isolated. So an important role that psychologists can help a person with chronic pain and moving along in their journey is to help to learn to like themselves again, to realize that their experiences are unfortunately very common and a normal part of reacting to a pain problem that doesn't go away. And so, Linda, I'm wondering what your experience with accepting your chronic pain was.
Well, Paul, you know we've talked about that word acceptance, and different words work for different people. For me, I wasn't able to use the word acceptance, and I choose to use adaptation. So I have adapted my life to having pain in it, but I don't bring that to the forefront anymore. Now, in the beginning, I did. In the beginning, I had the anger about the accident happening for me, and why was I going through this, and why couldn't I get the help to take the pain away? And I had the fears as well. So I was dealing with all of those emotions. Was I going to be able to live with this pain when I was told it was chronic pain? So it took me a while to be able to figure out how I was going to be able to move forward with my life when the pain was in it, and to be able to really function with it.
So it's a journey, and it doesn't happen in a flash.
It doesn't happen in a flash, and it is a real journey.
Want to talk next about what we're calling the pain cycle. And so once one's come to a point where you're feeling sort of better about yourself, and you're sort of in a position to look at, well, how can I live more effectively with this? The next step that's important is understanding your pain. And I think the critical notion here is that pain doesn't happen in isolation. When we feel pain, we react to it. We react to it by having strong feelings. It's noxious. It's not pleasant. We react to it by guarding the area of the body that hurts, so we're less likely to move. The emotional reactions can be stress. Lynn, you've talked about anger, about depression. And, well, what happens when we're stressed? What happens to our pain? Eli, you're not going to answer this one. What happens to your pain when you're stressed? It becomes more intense. And when your pain gets more intense, what happens to your stress level? Okay. And when you're really stressed, how do you sleep? So what this pain cycle can be before one's sort of figured out your personal pain plan is it can be a really downward spiral. So all of these interactions between various facets of one's life can interact in a way that actually creates a deeper, more complex problem. But understanding that this is all connected and part of your life is a really crucial step in figuring out what the solutions are, how to take that pain cycle and turn it around and begin to spiral back up. So was the pain cycle important for you?
Very important. This was something that helped me to figure out where I was at. And I was on that spiral going down, down, down. And I remember attending a lecture where they talked about if you can find some way on that, or somewhere on that pain cycle to intervene, one place you can start to break that cycle apart, and you can start to get control back again.
And we're going to talk about that more in the tool that's part of our piece. So we talked a little bit about acceptance before, but I want to expand on it a bit. Acceptance, at least in part, has to do with unlearning some things that have been actually, prior to having chronic pain, very, very important to us. And that's what we learned about acute pain from childhood onward. When we fell and scratched our knee, whenever we've had pain, we of course had that emotional reaction. We had care from our parents, likely, or a big brothers and sisters. And what we also learned is that usually in a short time, everything resolves. It gets better. So that becomes very ingrained in our psyche. This is how pain works. It hurts. We get the care we need. It gets better. We go on. So part of acceptance, if I can use the term, and terms are difficult, is to understand that chronic pain is actually different than that. It has to do with accepting or acknowledging that this is now a problem that there isn't a quick fix for. In fact, there might not be a cure or a fix for, but something that we got to live with and learn to manage and learn to have a life that is fulfilling and meaningful for ourselves, even with the problem. So, Lynn, what was...
Oh, I love this picture.
Is that you?
No.
No, okay.
Your question was?
Yeah. What was the accepting pain? What was your emotional reaction to the sort of clicking that this wasn't acute pain, this was different?
It kind of looks like that. It opened up the world for me again, whereas before I felt like this. I had cocooned myself, and the knowledge was the big part for me, and then being able to apply the knowledge. It opened up the world again for me, and I discovered that I could do things that I didn't think I was able to do.
That does sound like that picture. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And I love to hike, by the way.
So, accepting and coping, we obviously don't have the time to move through this in any detail, but what this picture is meant to represent is some of the facets of what coping with pain is really about. It has to do with educating oneself. It has to do with communicating. It has to do with learning to calm oneself, with healthy lifestyles. Vegetables are good, I think, is what that's telling us. and it has to do with being active. So all of these are facets of what living effectively, living healthily, living well with pain is about for most people. Any thoughts on that?
Well, and it takes a while to learn all of these things. Don't expect to do this overnight. I've had a few years on you, and I'll tell you about that in a little while. But don't give up. You know, try new things. Think about it carefully. Use the tools that you're hearing about today to assess whether strategies are working for you. And reach out to people like Dr. Taenzer, who can help you identify some things that you might like to try.
That's right. Yeah, it really is all about you and what's right for you. So with that segue, let's look at the next tool. So this is the pain journal. It's in your kit. So very briefly, most people's reaction to chronic pain in terms of an early coping style is to distract yourself from your pain so that you just try to ignore it. Anybody do that? Okay, lots of hands. The problem, and distractions has its place, but one of the problems is that when you're distracting yourself, you notice your pain when it overwhelms you, and at that point it's really quite out of control, and that leads to feeling overwhelmed with pain. So part of the answer is to get to know your pain better, to understand what are the other aspects of your life that impact your pain for worse and what makes it better. So, and the other thing is that one can have ideas about that, but if one's taking reasonably careful notes and records about that, you can see over time what relates to what else, what kinds of activities, for example, lead to an increase of pain. What happens when you've had a better night's sleep to your pain the next day? What is the impact of various food choices on how you feel and what your pain's like? How have you used your journal?
I started using the journals when I was involved 3 years in going to that psychoeducational group, Paul. And I used it for exactly how you described it. And I was able to pinpoint some of the things that exacerbated my pain, some of the strategies that made my pain better. And boy, does a good night's sleep ever make a difference, I can tell you. And I found that over time, though, I didn't need to use the journal quite as much. But, you know, I've reactivated my journal because I'm trying a new type of meditation that I do just before I go to sleep at night and just when I wake up in the morning. And I'm really quite interested in how that is going to make a difference on my energy levels, my pain levels.
Great. Great. So I think that's our last slide. So have we sort of answered the question of how a psychologist can be helpful in your pain journey? I guess, I'm not sure. Should I take that as a yes? Okay. Well, I think now it's time for a break. Hey.